folks. Welcome to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. Board of Public Works, Everett R. Roybal hearing. We'll join the Honorable Council Member, Dennis P. Zine. And do we anticipate Councilman Wisar to be present? Do we know? Well, we do have a quorum. We can move forward. I'm hoping he will show up. Hello, folks. We have a few items. I won't jinx this, but it looks like we might run pretty smooth here. We've got several cards. Before I go through the agenda and acknowledge the continued items and items I hope we can move on consensus with directives, when you do come to the microphone, try to speak into the microphone. You can tell the acoustics are not the best in here. If you're having a conversation, please take it outside so that we can be able to listen to our speakers. If there's an item that you wrote a letter or a very eloquent presentation, keep your eye on the clock. You have 2 minutes. Our clock says hello right now, but you will have 2 minutes to speak. And sometimes it's kind of frustrating because you're beginning down your letter and you're only halfway, and next thing you know, you're out of time. So try to get to your point as soon as possible. If there's a person who has already said or you are in agreement with, you could say, I agree with the previous speaker, and give us something different in terms of your point of view so that we're not repeating ourselves. So that would be very much appreciated. That being said, we don't have cards on number 1. And that one we could refer to the Bureau of Engineering in consultation with the City Attorney and the Planning Department. Number 2, we'll call special, given we have a few cards on that one. We'll be asking staff to give us a brief overview, and maybe they want to bring up their maps to give the council committee a better perspective of what it is we're working with in terms of geography and impact. That would be good. Item 3, there's a technical correction with BOE. So we request the city attorney to prepare the ordinance with that technical correction. Roberto, you should be reading these, shouldn't you?
You're the councilman, Mr. Reyes.
No, but in celebrating Berkeley's victory, as much as it pains me, we should do that.
I defer to you.
So I just make sure for the record, item number 1 is?
Yes, that's a referral to BOE, the city attorney, and the planning department, councilman. It's a motion to eliminate the street widening requirements on Overland Avenue.
And that item is, which item again?
That's item 1.
1, and item 3 we moved on as well, and
there's technical corrections that I believe the Bureau of Engineering submitted to the city clerk.
So it's been submitted?
Yeah.
Great.
And it'll be a referral to city attorney.
Okay. Item 4 is special. We'll call that one special. Item 5, what's item, right, Roberto?
That's a continued item, I believe, number 5, councilman.
That's to November 17th, and Plan and Council December 2nd. And I believe our Director, Gail Goldberg, is not here today. And number 7 will continue 1 week as well.
Oh, we are?
Okay. So, and we do have a rather sad announcement, but I'm sure it's joyous for her. We have Barbara with us, and Barbara has been an amazing facilitator for the city clerk. I think she has so much knowledge that we're going to have to keep you a little while longer to help us for the transition. Am I correct?
It will all depend on Mayor Councilman Hewitt.
Okay.
But I want to say it's been my pleasure serving both this committee and the council. I've had an opportunity to see some of the council members serve as deputies and transition into council members, which is quite unique. Actually, for more than a few terms.
That's true.
But I want to thank everybody that helped me work on this committee and facilitate the work that I've had to do throughout the years, and I particularly wanted to thank this committee for shepherding me into what was a very difficult assignment. I buried myself when I worked for about 6 years, and people that I talked to, they didn't know where I was. I want to be able to thank you very much.
Well, Barbara, I can tell you that you have facilitated this committee, and as a deputy, I did see you work, and as a council member, we get to share this experience. I think in many ways, as could be said for many of our city family members, there's so much institutional knowledge that gets built up with individual experiences, and to pass that on is not easy, because it's almost instinctual how you respond to the needs of the city. And so I appreciate your professionalism, your courtesy. I know sometimes we need clarity, and you're able to establish the questions that makes me pause and say, okay, what exactly did we do for the record? And the city attorney is always there to support us in that. So I want to thank you for your hard work. Hopefully you'll find a stained glass picture window for wherever you're going to go that has the beautiful rose that you do already have. And I look forward to working with you. And I'm not sure it's goodbye yet, though, right? Technically, though, this is the end of
Friday will be my last day. I probably will show up at least 1 or 2 times for congratulatory speeches. But
Okay.
other than that, my official last day on the city record will be this coming Friday.
Okay, well, I won't say goodbye yet, but I do want to say thank you so much for everything you've done, and there's a whole group of folks who don't get recognized and make the city work, and you're one of them, and I thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, council members.
How many years, Barbara?
27 and a half.
Oh, man, okay.
I think I'm the first council that was here when I was here, but I'll say that for a council meeting.
Jeez, my back hurts thinking about it. All right, that's a long time. Good for you, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. So, that being said, great, my eyes came. I believe we can begin with the agenda, Roberto?
Yes, Councilman, the next item will be item 2, which is a status report from the Planning Department relative to the Nexus Study for the, I believe, the area around USC and the USC specific plan.
I want to thank USC for their coordination support in this effort, and I'd like to acknowledge our department personnel. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Arthi Varma, Planning Department staff to this project. On December 3rd, 2008, a motion was passed by City Council directing the City Planning Department to prepare a specific plan for the USC University Park campus. The council motion also directed the Planning Department to work with USC on a Nexus study for the area surrounding the university, as well as on a development agreement. The presentation today is an update to provide the council members with information on the status of the various components of the USC's specific plan program. Just by way of background information, the council motion came in response to the completion of the university's 2030 University Park Campus Master Plan, which the university has been working on for the past 3 years. The USC Master Plan is an effort led by the university to create a framework to address the future physical development of its campus. The USC specific plan, on the other hand, is a city-initiated plan to establish a land use regulatory framework for the physical development that is proposed in the USC Master Plan. The goal of the city-initiated plan, specific plan, is to foster a unified vision that benefits both the university and the surrounding community within the context of the university's proposed development. There are 3 sub-areas of the USC specific plan, and you can see the specific plan is shaded on the map to my left in gray. The majority of the development that's being proposed is in sub-area 3, which is just north of Jefferson. The new development in the specific plan may include new academic space, the redevelopment of the University Village Shopping Center, the addition of 250 faculty units, up to 5,400 student beds, and a hotel and conference center, as well as a university-affiliated kindergarten through 8th grade lab school and community educational facility. The specific plan will go through its own public process to create a regulatory system with the objectives of promoting integration, connectivity, and accessibility between the University Park campus and the surrounding community. The specific plan itself is in its early phases. Staff is beginning the initial public outreach phase, wherein a series of small group meetings or focus groups will be held to gather relevant issues, concerns, and opportunities. These meetings are being scheduled and will occur beginning the end of October through November. After those small group meetings, the staff will evaluate the issues that are raised and begin drafting a specific plan, responding to the concerns where possible. Staff has also been working on the EIR. A scoping meeting was held in February of this year, and since then, staff has been working with various city departments as well as the environmental consultant on the draft EIR. Staff has also been working on the Nexus Study for the area, and if you can see on the map to my left, the area in green is the Nexus Study area. It's bounded by Washington Boulevard on the north, Grand Avenue on the east, Normandy Avenue to the west, and Vernon Avenue to the south. Staff has been working with our Nexus Study consultants over the past few months to develop a proposed scope of work for the Nexus Study, and that's actually attached as Exhibit C in your report. The purpose of the Nexus Study is threefold. One, to provide a needs assessment regarding housing, jobs, green space, parking, alternative transportation, public infrastructure, and public facilities. Two, to establish the nexus between the new development proposed in the specific plan and its impacts on the larger Nexus Study area. And three, to provide recommendations for potential implementation tools for the South and Southeast LA community plan areas in response to needs identified in the Nexus Study. In particular, there will be an in-depth analysis of the existing supply and demand of housing in terms of affordability and availability. And in addition, there will be an evaluation of the existing jobs, employment, and retail needs of the area. The Nexus Study findings may be used as a basis for negotiating relevant provisions of the development agreement. And just one thing to note, the outline for the Nexus Study that you have is a working document and intended to set forth a broad scope for what the Nexus Study is going to look at. Details of the study will be worked out along the way as the components of the study are completed by the consultants. And I just also wanted to note one more thing, that the Nexus Study, while it is a very important component of the specific plan, there are other critical studies out there that have been conducted by other independent organizations and community members, and these studies will be evaluated by the Planning Department in its final recommendations on either the specific plan, the Nexus Study area, or the actual provisions of the development agreement. Thank you, and staff will be available for any questions.
Well, thank you for that presentation. Councilman, maybe we should hear public comment, then we'll have questions to make sure we are understanding of how it's being viewed by the various folks who are involved in this process. We have a few cards with us. We have Monique Uriarte, Eva Bromberg, Sandra McNeil, and Gabriela Garcia. So I'd like to come on up and give us your name and address, and just keep an eye on the clock. You got 2 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monique Uriarte. I live on 801 West 23th Street, and I working for Esperanza Community Housing as a community health promoter and Figueroa Corredor Community Land Trust as a community organizer. First of all, I want to say thank you for the extension of this study, and I want to say thank you especially to Ed Reyes to attend our previous Voces de la Comunidad Community Voices event. And for us, it's crucial to have this opportunity to say, as you remember in our presentation, we are lost more than 40% of our housing in our area. And for us, it's very sad to see how our families are disseminated overnight because we have displacement problems in our area. We want to say this is a crucial moment to work in conjunction, university, community, and city to find out how can address these important issues, because we don't want to keep losing our families for our neighborhoods. Also, for us, it's very important that you see how this problem of displacement are crucial in our community. We want to say thank you again, and please pay attention to this problem in our community.
Thank you very much. I do know that Councilman Perry also joined me on that day. It was a Saturday, correct? And so Councilman Perry, representing District 9, was also present. Good day, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Ava Bromberg. I'm an urban planner and a PhD student at UCLA. And I'm going to be speaking today generally a little bit about the process of the Nexus Study, some concerns and particular concerns about the scope of work for the Nexus Study, and things we're hoping and confident will be addressed. The things mentioned today will be detailed in a letter that we'd like to submit.
Please.
Okay. There's four basic points. The first being to ensure that USC exerts no greater influence in the process of developing the Nexus Study than any other interested member of the public. Unlike a CEQA process where, by its very design, creates legal safeguards in the event that the project's environmental impacts are not adequately disclosed, here no such safeguards exist. And in the event that the consultants preparing the Nexus Study fail to adequately analyze the impacts on the surrounding community, an impacted community member has no recourse by way of similar state statute. The second point, which is related, is to ensure that the Nexus Study is as comprehensive as possible in analyzing the issues set forth in the council motion, regardless of USC's determination as to the reasonable cost of the study. The third, the most important piece, to ensure that all data and data sources for the Nexus Study are transparent and available for public review. This is particularly important to ensure the transparency. And fourth, to utilize, as the staff planner Arthi Varma just mentioned, and as the department has repeatedly said it will, a wide range of sources, including input from community organizations, the 2007 Enterprise Community Partners University Park Housing Study, and the Strategic Economics Expo Line TOD Study in formulating policy and implementing ordinances for the area surrounding the USC specific plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Sandra McNeil. Good afternoon.
Sandra McNeil with the Figueroa Corridor Community Land Trust. I work in CD 9, 2 blocks from the specific plan area, and live at 2636 Kenwood Avenue, about 8 blocks from the west side of the specific plan area. I wanted to make a couple of general points. One, that we would like to ensure in the Nexus Study, and that the Nexus Study contributes to a specific plan that encourages or at least permits greater level of affordable on-campus student housing than those currently contemplated. There's a maximum limit that's referenced now in the specific plan, and we'd like to encourage the raising of that limit. The Nexus Study also, we ask that it examine a full spectrum of housing impacts in a way that facilitates policy making and provides for implementation of ordinances in the future. And Arthi referenced that briefly. Specifically regarding the structure of the scope of work regarding the housing and household and affordability sections in the Nexus Study, there's a reference to affordable housing. It's actually placed in quotes in the scope of work. And we'd like to ensure that the term affordable is defined as referenced to area median income that's utilized by LAHD, and that that the units that are examined are not only the affordable units that are currently under affordability covenants and price restrictive programs, that we also look at low-cost housing in the area. That's where we've seen the most impact in our neighborhood, privately held properties that are converting from family serving use to community serving use. So in looking at that data, we feel like it's,
You could conclude.
it's just essential that we look at data that's not only census data, and that the LHD data may not be timely, but that you look at employing other sources of data that will provide a more comprehensive picture.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last speaker, Gabriela Garcia. Hi, good day.
Hi, how are you, Councilman? How are you? My name is Gabriela Garcia. I'm a resident of the Estrella community. My address is 2119 Norwood Street. And I'm also community organizer for the Unidad campaign, which is the United Neighbors in Defense Against Displacement. And so I'd like to address, as part of the scope of work under the local economic development, I've had an opportunity as the organizer for the campaign, and the campaign is under the Figueroa Corridor Coalition for Economic Justice. And I've had an opportunity to speak with many business owners that have experienced already a rise in rents and being impacted by the greater kind of retail that's specifically on Figueroa. So we've definitely for it to be through the scope of work, you have it relevant under employment as well, as in parentheses. So we want to ensure that there's improvement in infrastructure as far as streetscape and facade improvements on local small businesses. We want to ensure that we preserve the small businesses. They are truly serving our community at the moment, and we want our businesses to reflect the diversity of our community as well. And so we are also, as part of the reference in the Nexus Study, we're also engaging community residents in the grassroots community planning effort. We just hosted a Visions for Vermont event, which specifically is looking at preserving the Vermont corridor and ensuring that we preserve our small local businesses. So we want to ensure that on that Nexus Study that we have assessment for preserving our small local businesses, and we work a model for them.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I did want to invite the council officers, if there's anyone here from District 8 or 9. If not, yes, come on up. And you want to share some few thoughts, perspective?
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon. Marie Rumsey here on behalf of Councilmember Perry. And we've been working closely with Arthi and Faisal on the Nexus Study, and I think they've done a great job at really expanding the scope of work and making it inclusive. I thought the point that Sandra brought up about defining affordable housing is a good one, and hopefully something we can incorporate. And then I also thought the small business sustainability is a good point, and maybe something we could explore a little bit more too. But I'm glad we have this opportunity today. This was the intent, to get some feedback, and I think we got some great ideas.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any other council district representatives here? Seeing none. I just want to acknowledge, I do see personnel from USC. I want to thank you for being here. Mr. Lee, the former planning department employee in another life. And Mr. Galavis, who also represents the government relations portion of the university. So I want to thank you for being here, and you're welcome to come to the microphone should you desire or compel to speak. If not, I respect your decision. So that being said, I don't see anyone else would want to speak in public hearing on this item, so we can open to question and answer. We're going to have the staff come to the microphone. Do you have some comments and questions? I'd like to invite Councilman Zine if you have any observations or questions you'd like to make.
Some questions, Mr. Chair. How much is the study going to cost?
I don't have that exact figure. That's something that we're going to be determining along the way.
And who's going to pay for the study?
USC.
The whole tab?
Sorry?
The entire tab? Fight on, I like that.
That was in the original council motion.
I wasn't here back then.
The planning staff is nodding yes, so I want to make sure it's
I
recorded.
like
She's
that.
saying yes.
There's always the question, who's going to pay for it, especially when we don't have any money to pay for anything. The census tracts in that large area, you're talking about the project site, but then there's the broader area in green.
Correct.
Is the study going to conduct in the entire green and the dark area?
Correct, and it does encompass multiple census tracts that we've been working with.
And are those going to be updated, because the census is now 10 years old, to reflect the current demographics?
Yeah, the census does projections to date, and we're going to be using the most recent projections that they have.
In the language, multiple languages within those boundaries, are the documents and reports and outreach going to be done in multiple languages?
We can explore making the study available in different languages, particularly at least the executive summary, and if not more.
when you're meeting with the community groups, multiple language ability for them to ask questions?
Yes, all of our public meetings that we have have materials that are in at least English and Spanish, and we do have bilingual facilities. But I think that's a good point about the Nexus study itself.
I know that area from my days with the police department, and there's some areas that need improvement. There's some areas that have been improved, but overall, the displacement of the folks in that area, and how's the coordination that's going to take place?
The coordination, well, the Nexus study is going to be evaluating the displacement that has occurred by looking at historical patterns. We're looking at back to I think it's the 1980s with regards to the data that we're using, and looking at the demographic shift that has occurred within the area in the green since that time. So I think we'll be able to get a little bit of information about displacement through household characteristics and other demographic data.
And the time frame, what's your time frame on this?
Well, we're not committing to specific time frames because of departmental resources and priorities, but I do imagine
you have priorities, or you just have the open book?
we do have priorities, but I do believe that the study will be done in the coming months and on a parallel track as the EIR is being done.
And what about the neighborhood councils and the chambers of commerce and neighborhood watch groups? Is there outreach to all those groups?
We're actually just beginning our public outreach phase, so our first meeting is going to be this week, and we're going to be continuing on through November. We're meeting with the neighborhood councils, the community plan advisory committees, the bid for the area. There's not a particular chamber for this area. We're going through the bid as sort of an alternative. We're working with the Figueroa Corridor Coalition. We're working with the historic preservation advocates in the community, and we welcome other organizations that are interested.
And your outreach will include the entire demographics of the area?
Yes.
And in the event that there's going to be build-out, because according to the report, there's a requirement for build-out, residential, faculty, additional facilities for the university. Is there a plan when folks are going to be relocated, how that has already been decided, or that's still to be decided?
I think it's still early on to have a response to those issues, but those will be considered as we begin actually drafting the plan for the area and the different components of the plan.
Because there will be some displacement of residents.
On the sub-area 3, which is the area in the gray just to the north of Jefferson, that little piece that's separated, there is existing housing that will be redeveloped, and perhaps I can let the university speak to the specifics of that, but there will be new and additional housing added to that sub-area.
But the folks that I'm concerned about are the ones that are currently residing in those boundaries. There'll be provision for those folks for relocation or some type of financial assistance?
I think those are things that will be negotiated in the development agreement. We aren't at that point yet, but those are issues that we will be looking at.
So there's a lot on the plate.
Right, and if I can clarify, Vince Bertoni, Deputy Director, I believe that the area that Arthur is talking about is already owned by the university, right. So it would be university-owned housing where they'd be displacing their own students. As part of this, their specific planned development project, which will be constructed over 2 phases. So they have a phasing plan, in essence, in place for their own students.
Yeah, and looking at the map, the gray area, is that all SC property, or does that include other additional properties?
Yeah, there's the gray area, which is the specific plan area, is 207 acres. 201 of those acres are owned by the university. Okay. There's a senior housing project on a portion of the sub-area that they're not planning on touching at this time.
And then the green area, that obviously the larger area, are there future plans to expand one way or another, whether it's housing or academic environment, into the green areas?
Not under this plan. The actual development that's going to be occurring is in the gray area, which is university-owned area.
And is it possible that continues west to connect with another university?
Well, and I should say, if I could clarify also, when we talk about development, we're talking about the specific plan itself. So the project is both a specific plan. There's also, as a component of that, a very specific development project to the north end of it. So they're kind of master planning, if you will. What they're doing right now is all of that area in that kind of dark charcoal gray on the map, which is project site. So the green part's coming later.
The green part is the Nexus Study area where we're evaluating the impacts of the specific plan development. So
Onto it.
it's the development in the gray area. What are the impacts to the green area?
And we don't know of any plans that USC has to go outside of that dark gray area. I think all the plans that they've indicated today is that they'd like to confine everything they plan on doing within that dark gray area on the map.
Well, we were welcome to continue, obviously, to expand the opportunities. And I was being somewhat facetious when I asked continuing to the west, because to the west of that is another institution, where Mr. Reyes is always waving the flag. Thank you.
Let it go.
Thank you very much.
That's pretty far west.
Thank you.
All right. First, I want to thank you for your hard work, and again, thank Councilman Rizai for his questions. This is a process. We'll be getting updates as we continue down the path towards completing the study. Excuse me, we had a long council meeting today, so
That's why I had my lunch here, because we went so long.
I know. The specific plan, and that's a study are city-driven documents. So as a result, in this cooperation with the university, which I'm very grateful, we can continue to look at how public input opportunities can be improved as we go through these processes. So we envision group sessions and public workshops and eventually the mandated public hearings. But do you see going down that path?
Yes, certainly. There will be a series of small group meetings that we're entering into the phase of right now. There will be a public workshop, an open house, public hearing. So those will all be opportunities for public comment.
And those are as evident by Councilmember Perry's presence at that Saturday meeting. We spent the whole morning listening to many issues. And so it's going to be one of those moments of creative tension where we can gather all the different, I think, desires and goals that I truly believe are complementary with the USC's in trying to establish an urban environment that does have a healthy sense of balance for the students, for the school, as well as for the folks who live in and around the area. I truly believe that if we are opportunistic with this process, that we can actually establish the type of urban village concept that makes USC that much more grand in its role in this great city. They have a tremendous history and their involvement from the general hospital to this location. It's an asset that the city truly is benefiting from. And I think that it's reciprocal. The Nexus Study itself is, I believe, a broad scope outline, and it's not definitive. And so we have the ability to further make requests to study issues that are raised in our public and outreach process. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yes, that's correct.
In terms of avenues for input beyond the subject Nexus Study, the city could consider the grassroots community's assessments and making final recommendations. Are we going to allow for that?
Yes, we are. In fact, some of the input that's coming out of the public outreach meetings that are upcoming will be included.
I look forward to these continued updates, and I know I represent the northern region of the study. I believe Councilmember Perry is a significant portion of the study, and Council District 8 as well, correct?
Correct. We've been working closely with all three council districts.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you want to add for the record, or anything that we need to point out?
No, I look forward to coming back in the near future.
Great. So we instruct the planning department coordination of the different district offices 8, 9, and 9, along with the CIA and DOT and Departments of Public Safety to provide a status update in 45 days. So as we move forward as a planning department, we want to make sure that DOT is moving along with you, along with building and safety, and CRA, since these are all overlapping city family members. So we hate to get to a place and then have to wait for someone else because of lack of communication coordination. And I want to thank USC again for their hard work, and the committee members. I know you took your day off, some of you have to work, some of you have 2 jobs, and you took this time to get here, just to get parking here in of itself is a victory, but to be here and listen to your voice is very important as well. So I look forward to your continuous participation in this process, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roberto, next item?
Next item is item 4, Councilman. It's an M&D appeal filed by James Childs, and it has to do with the proposed construction of 2 residential structures and a parking lot in your district.
Okay, which district?
Yours, Councilman,
Oh,
the
okay.
first district.
All right, that's, acoustics are bad here. Let's hear the planning report.
Okay.
And then we'll move, so this is a staff report, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Sorry?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Matthew Gillespie from the Community Planning Bureau. I am the planner assigned to the University Park Historic Preservation Overlay Zone, which is the historic district located just southwest of downtown near the USC campus.
Is this the first time you present?
Yeah, really small before, a while ago.
Oh, okay, all right. That's all right. Well, I recognize this.
I look
Okay,
nervous.
good.
Okay. So I was the planner for this director's determination and for the M&D that are in question today. The appeal is of an M&D that was adopted for the proposed development of a new 4-unit infill residential project at 2317 South Scarf Street. That's about 23rd and just west of Figueroa. The proposed project includes a detached front and rear structures and a subterranean parking lot on a currently vacant lot. There had been a fire there a few years ago that the fire department had to level the lot. The M&D was adopted by the South LA Planning Commission, upholding the original director's determination, which approved a certificate of appropriateness for the new construction. A certificate of appropriateness is the highest level of design review for projects located in our historic districts. The appeal before you touches on many issues, but I think the main concerns can be summarized into 3 points. Those would be traffic, parking, and potential impacts to historic resources. The Planning Department, after a careful review of the appeal and in consultation with our Office of Historic Resources and our Environmental Review Section, believes the M&D sufficiently analyzed the potential significant impacts associated with the project and found that the proposed development would not impair the historic district. We therefore conclude that the appeal should be denied. In regards to traffic and circulation concerns, the appellant argues that the M&D failed to take into account the cumulative impact of 4 other potential projects in the area. However, we've looked at that, and 2 of the projects that are mentioned are actually not even proposed projects. They're just vacant lots. We don't have any applications in front of us, therefore they're not applicable under CEQA. A 3rd project was completed a few years ago, and therefore it's likely considered an existing project under CEQA and not part of a cumulative review. However, even if we do include all the potential projects cited by the appellant, we've got a total of 26 total units in those, and that falls well below the city's thresholds for what constitutes a significant traffic impact. I believe that number in this area would be about 85 units. Again, we're dealing with 26 units total. So we don't believe there's a traffic impact. There's also a mention of the alleyway, some concern that the alley doesn't have sufficient entrance and exit. This project would enter off the rear alley. The appellant mentions that one of the access points of the alleys is closed off currently. However, there are 3 actual access points to this location from alleyways, so a 4th being closed, we didn't consider that to be a significant impact. With regards to parking, the appellant raised the issue of the project's compliance with a recently enacted ordinance called the Neighborhood Stabilization Ordinance. This is an ordinance that just applies in this general area around USC. It was previously called the Off-Campus Housing Ordinance, and it was changed. This ordinance is essentially a parking ordinance. It's intended to ensure that new or expanded units with 5 or more habitable rooms in the USC area contain sufficient parking. Insomuch as CEQA deals with parking issues, it instructs us simply to consider whether the project's proposed parking supply is more or less than is required by existing city codes. Our response is, first of all, that the NSO was not in place at the time of the MND adoption or the project approval. It became enacted in November 2008 after the approvals. So the project was clearly compliant at that time. It's my understanding at this point, however, that the project is exempt from that ordinance because it was filed for plans were submitted to the Building and Safety, and plan check was started before the ordinance was enacted. Building and Safety determines they're to therefore be exempt as far as I can tell. I have followed up with officials at Building and Safety. They've determined that the permits are still valid. They're I think about 11 months old. I think they've got 18 months. So it's my understanding that they are exempt from that ordinance and therefore they're compliant with city codes. I'll just add that, compliance with parking is determined by Building and Safety at the time of permits are pulled. If they do need more parking, they'll have to come back, and if that changes the project, they'll have to come back through our process. The final point is on historic resources. The appellant claims the MND is deficient because it did not sufficiently consider the property's impact on the historic district as a whole. He states that the MND failed to acknowledge the presence of the overlapping St. James Park National Register District. So this is part of a local district. It's also part of a National Register Historic District. However, the MND did in fact acknowledge the presence of the National Register District in the environmental settings section. We believe that's the appropriate place to mention it. And for the purposes of CEQA, the project cites presence in a national district is treated no differently than a local district. They're both considered historic resources, whether state, city, local. We look at it as a historic resource. Either way, it was treated as such, and the proper mitigations were put in place to make sure that the project was in compliance. In this case, the mitigations in the MND include compliance with the federal Secretary standards, the local city HPOZ ordinance, and the neighborhood level preservation plan, which contains a whole series of design guidelines for infill construction, and this project met every single one of them, we believe. Just generally, an EIR is only called for when mitigation measures are considered insufficient to prevent a substantial adverse change to a historic resource. State CEQA guidelines make clear that when historic protections are already in place, as they are here in University Park, that an MND is sufficient. In a sense, it's the protections are the mitigation, in effect. In the University Park HPOZ, the Planning Department utilizes the detailed residential infill guidelines contained in the University Park Preservation Plan to evaluate neighborhood compatibility with all new construction projects. The Planning Department, in agreement with the HPOZ Board, which voted to approve this, and the South Los Angeles Area Planning Commission, which heard this on appeal, we all believe that this project meets all of the relevant design guidelines, and actually are quite myself, if I could just, quite proud of this project. I think it's actually a model project for our historic districts as far as infill development goes. It really was meant to replicate the footprint of the house that was there, and we're able to separate it into two buildings, get parking underground. So we feel confident recommending to deny this appeal. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your hard work. I know Mr. Lambert is here too from Historic Resources. Any comments you would like to make or shed any light on this case?
If there are questions I can answer, I think that Matt did a thorough analysis of the issues that we looked at relative to how the project did comply with the preservation plan for University Park. Also in the record, there was a letter that I sent to Matt. Part of this process is that during a COA review, a certificate of appropriateness, our office has a chance to comment on the design, and those comments are meant to go to the planner, who looks at both the comments we make and what the HPOZ board recommends. So my comments, which were really at the level of kind of the architectural design of this, raised an issue about the aspect of underground parking. So you might hear something about that today, but that's really meant as a comment that should the applicant be willing to look at alternative designs, that's a comment they could take into account. But the process of the COA being adopted or approved by the planning department really doesn't, make that comment carry any additional weight. And the fact that the HPOZ board recommended approval, I think, is their understanding that it does comply with the preservation plan.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. So, Matt, if you don't mind, which are the bodies that have already approved this? Can you just speak to what it's been through and who has approved this project?
Sure. Yeah, this project has had a kind of a quite lengthy review process, actually. It's, as new construction, it's required to get the certificate of appropriateness. That requires to get a recommendation from the HPOZ board, which is the local board in the neighborhood, as well as our Office of Historic Resources. So during the course of getting the recommendation from the board, we had about 10, 11, 12 meetings, consultations, and then further refinement as additional issues were brought up, and just making sure that this met every single guideline in that plan. It was quite a thorough process. And then we take those two recommendations, the planning department writes a final determination letter, the director's determination, with all the findings from the guidelines stated there. It was appealed, and the appeal went to South Los Angeles APC, who unanimously supported our decision.
Councilman Stein, any questions from the staff? Okay. Let's go to the appellant, Mr. Jim Charles, I believe. And then I have Mitzi Mosul. Hi.
Good afternoon, Jim Childs, 2341 Scarf Street, the appellant. Thank you. Quickly, it's in the University Park HPOZ. It's in the National Register District. Scarf Street has 11 monuments on it. It's a very unique historic setting and very important to this city. There are 4 projects, 3 of which are within 70 feet of this project. The combined total of these 4 approved projects are 34 units with 89 bedrooms for 178 students. And I'm being told there's no such thing as cumulative impact. The Planning Department's environmental unit takes each project separately and uses a standardized threshold to make a determination on where or what will happen. And standardized thresholds can be used in other environments, but not in this environment, and that's the inherent problem with their MND process. They've created a special zone. They have design guidelines which cover built form. I'm not here to talk about the built form. I'm here to talk about the impacts, traffic, circulation, and parking in particular. In addition, we recently found out through the process of another environmental document for the adjoining property at 2323 Scarf Street that BOE conditions are implicit in the condominium project. The neg deck, the mitigated neg deck for this is based on a categorical exemption, an initial study and checklist that defines the project as a 4-unit condominium project. Those conditions should have been known and accounted for. They still aren't. Finally, I would like to say this. There's been plenty made of the fact that the HPOZ board approved the project, and nothing has been said about the HPOZ board's unanimous decision to reject the MND.
No, you can continue if you want to finish.
Well, yeah, I'd like to finish.
Why don't you finish?
I was trying to get my 2 minutes in. And
no, you've got some more time. Go ahead.
Okay, it's very difficult, as you well know. What I find problematic here is this process wherein each element, Mr. Glesney mentioned a project that was already done, and therefore it doesn't count because he's looking at it as a finished project. When I complained in the MND about its cumulative impacts, I was told that other things weren't there. So for 5 years now, I've been raising this issue of cumulative impacts, and I get no result. At some point, something has to stop. The city has a problem with who is the last person caught. That's the city's problem. It's not my problem. You have to resolve this. Based on what's been going on, theoretically, every historic structure could be removed from Scarf Street and new construction would be put in, and there would never be a threshold that required the analyzation of cumulative impacts. That's where you stand in how you process environmental documents today. And that's the problem for you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mitzi Mosul, good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Mitzi Mosul, appearing on behalf of West Adams Heritage Association, which represents more than 300 households within the area, including in the very immediate area of this project. Cumulative impacts, I've been told by a couple of people that we can't win this based on cumulative impacts. And that's a very serious problem, because at what point do those cumulative impacts take over? You can't look at a project in a vacuum. That's not good planning. We have an area that we have designated as special, but we're not treating it as special. We have planning regulations that are being ignored and or dismissed. Both of these are very serious, and frankly, what I have been seeing of late is that the planning department has become very slap-happy with issuing MNDs. That seems to be the answer to all of their problems. I guess they think that it absolves them in some way. But there are very severe adverse impacts to this project. Cumulative impact is defined to mean that the increased effects of a project are considerable when viewed in connection with the effects of past, current, and probable future projects. So even if we were to assume that there are no projects on the books for some of the adjacent properties, we have to assume that something will happen there at some time, whether it's tomorrow, next month, next year, or 10 years from now. And that's what cumulative impact has to look at. So we would ask that you grant this. I know my time is up, but I just want to say I don't know why we're in such a hurry on this. It seems to me it's an artificial deadline. Shouldn't we, especially when we're dealing with such an important historic area, shouldn't we be careful and tread lightly and slowly and make sure that we get it right rather than just rush in? Only fools rush in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speakers are Michael J. Coppice?
Correct, Coppice.
And Robert Tyler, whoever wants to speak first.
Mr. Chair, Michael Coppice, 199 South Los Robles Avenue, Suite 420, Pasadena, representing the owner of the project, DGL Partners. First of all, the application for a certificate of occupancy was filed 14 months ago. So this is a project that has been pending for 14 months. It is a project that comes to you with a very high degree of public participation. There were many meetings that took place between the owner and the architect and the HPOZ. The staff has already alluded to that. There were many private meetings that took place with Mr. Child regarding this project as well. The HPOZ voted to approve the certificate of occupancy or recommend approval, and to recommend approval of the mitigated negative declaration by a vote of 3-1. The only negative was called in by somebody who wasn't at the meeting. Staff has reviewed this project and has recommended approval. The Area Planning Commission, we've been there, and by a unanimous 4-0 vote, they recommended approval and approval of the MND as well. All of these bodies before you, they got it right. The facts here do not rise to the level where an environmental impact report would need to be done. The number of units is well below that allowed for the zoning of the area. The size of the project is small. This is only a 4-unit project. And in fact, we think staff has proceeded rather cautiously here, as this project likely qualifies for exemption from the CEQA process altogether under the city's own CEQA guidelines and the urban infill guidelines set forth by the state. As far as the historic nature of the area, I note that the architect here has been engaged 20 years in design of historic structures. As a former and longtime member of the Pasadena Design Commission, you can tell from the drawing that a high degree of expertise was devoted to design in this area. the project meets all relevant standards in that regard, and we would request that you deny the appeal.
Thank you. Mr. Copus, it's 4 units. What do you think the rents will go like in this facility, given its architectural stature?
I don't know if there's been a projection of the rents. The owner is here, as well as the architect.
Just curious, because I know people talk about process and costs, and so I get a feel for that. But yeah, Mr. Robert Tyler?
Mr. Tyler may have some input on that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, my name is Robert Tyler. I'm the architect for the project. As Michael said, I'm no stranger to working in a historic context. Been for the last 20 years doing just that, although in the Highlands. And I'm very sympathetic to the concerns that are implicit with developing an infill project in a historic context. We feel that through 4 pre-application consultation meetings with the HPOZ board, followed by 2 subsequent on-the-record meetings, if you will, following our application, that we've developed a project that is thoroughly sympathetic with the concerns and intents and guidelines set forth in the preservation plan. This seemed to be the consensus of the HPOZ board through their approval of the process. In fact, also the process included the appellant at virtually every single meeting during which we sought to gain his support as an ex-member of that board himself, and a person who was instrumental in the development of that plan, which is quite notable. So we felt like we needed to understand his perspective and to develop a project that met the requirements of the plan and of the board. There were redesigns at every single meeting, whether it was pre-application or during the actual approval request process. The original project came to the board with 5 or 6 units. I really can't remember. It was significantly downsized. We've moved the front building back to approximately a third of the depth of the site, fairly significant, even more than what's required by the preservation plan. We've cut pieces out of it. We've developed an architectural vocabulary that recalls the house that was destroyed at this location. And we really feel like we've bent over backwards to make this project a superior project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That concludes the public comment, given there are a number of cards on this item. Councilman Zahn, I just wanted to ask the staff one question in terms of this cumulative, because I know we have a legal set of parameters we follow.
Right.
The observation of Mr. Childs in terms of the cumulative, was that folded in the analysis as your recommendations came forward?
Yes, it was, Councilman. I'm not an environmental expert, so I consulted with our folks in our environmental review section who referred me to the Department of Transportation guidelines. They kind of told me what the trip threshold is and how that translated into the unit threshold. Again, I was told the threshold on Scarf Street, I think it's Collector Street, would be a 85 total cumulative units, would then trigger a traffic impact study to determine if there's impacts. Even if we do take into account the broadest range of projects that were developed in the last few years and projects that haven't been built yet that have been proposed, we've got a 26 unit count. So it's 26 versus the 85 would trigger that. Mr. Childs does reference, I think, 2 other sites in the neighborhood that are vacant that could be developed with possible 4 to 5, 6 unit developments. Even if we count those, I don't think we'd get to that level. But again, those we don't have applications or any proposal for those.
Okay, so it's just what's in front of us. Okay.
It was like that.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Well, I know Mr. Childs has been a strong advocate, and for all the years I've known him, he's been a real warrior, very tenacious. But I also know that as a result of that effort, as painful as it may be for some, and going through this process, that it's a very handsome structure, and it's very well articulated, and it's, some neighbors, I wish they could build stuff like that, but it is what it is here, and it's beautiful in my mind. But I just like to look at the fact that the MMD was reviewed with various city departments, including the Office of Historic Resources, the Community Planning Department, HPOZ staff, the BOE, DOT, Land Use, and Secret City Attorney staff as well. And looking at the additional responses that are being submitted into the public record on the file, which clarifies and responds further how the impacts are addressed by the city. So again, that's on the file. So in coordination with all these departments and additional responses relative to project impacts, cumulative impacts with respects to sequential losses and trips and historical resources, responses to potential impacts relative to public improvements are submitted, including an attached grant of a waiver relative to required street dedication. Based on these facts, I would recommend to move to deny the bill with the added responses amended into the file. And that would be my recommendation to this committee. So we have a second, and that will be the action of this committee. And Mr. Charles, maybe later we can talk about this parameters you were discussing and see if there's any way we can fit that in as we move forward in this neighborhood. But that being said, that would be the action of this committee. Roberto, anything else?
Public comment, Council.
Anybody have a public comment that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.